happy for everyone to be here. Just a quick introduction. We've got Caleb here from our sister companies, Lucid Chart. He is the creative director over there. And we also have Katie from the Wolf Company coming to us from sunny Phoenix, Arizona, who is a graphic designer on their marketing team there. Again, thank you so much for coming, and we're just going to dive in. Today, I'm hoping to have kind of just a casual discussion where we break down what it's like working in the creative field, being a graphic designer in this kind of new and uncertain time. We're, at least in where I live, we're about 8 weeks into this, is about when we were all told to go home from work, and it seems like things are changing all the time, but I'm interested in talking to these two wonderful people and getting some ideas out there. So let me just pull up some of the questions I have to get us started.
It's great seeing all these people from all over the place. Thanks for showing us where you're from.
Yeah, we got New York, Hawaii, Pennsylvania.
A lot of people from Colorado.
Ottawa.
Fantastic.
Sacktown, El Paso. All right. So the first thing we're going to do is just a quick poll. I want to get an idea of how big each of your marketing teams or creative teams are. So I'm just going to launch a poll real quick here and allow you to just jump in and show the size of group you're on. And number one could be like if you're a freelance designer or you're just the one person on your team. We've got a lot of 2 to 10. Almost half, more than half of the group is in this 2 to 10 range. I should say that my marketing team, it's me, I'm the art director, and then we have another graphic designer that I work with. Caleb, your team is a little bit bigger, I think.
Yeah, so the marketing team is 25 plus, maybe even closer to 35 or 40, but the creative team itself is just around the 9 or 10 mark. So.
Yeah, and Katie, it's just you over there, right?
Our creative team is pretty small. It's just me for creative, but I also work with 3 marketing experts. We may be small, but we're an army of many as we work with several design agencies across the nation as well.
That's awesome. So just in our little group here, we kind of represent a few different sizes here, but it looks like most people work on a pretty small team. So it's a pretty, I feel like when you work on a small team, a lot of design work, you have to wear a lot of different hats. And so that's good to know as we're moving forward, that that's where a lot of people are at. Although I'm kind of jealous of 2 of you who have a group of 50 or more. That must be pretty large organizations you're at. So let's dive in here. So the first portion of this discussion, I want to focus around with everyone working from home, it can be easy for teams to get stuck in silos, face process bottlenecks, and lose motivation and creativity. So I actually want to launch another poll right away, and it's about creative burnout. And I just want to see how many of you in the last 2 months during the whole COVID thing have been experiencing creative burnout. Wow, yeah.
Pretty high numbers there, Scott.
Yeah.
I imagine.
Yeah, so let's see here. I'll share this with you guys.
Yeah, sure.
So 60% said yes. So Katie and Caleb, what new challenges are you facing in keeping yourself and your team inspired and creative? And have you yourselves felt creative burnout?
Yeah, I can start. I think it's kind of interesting because it kind of feels like an exaggerated microcosm of just the everyday kind of creative thing, where it's like there are certain times where I just feel completely burnt out and I just like can't figure it out, and then certain times where I find my wave. It just feels like being in this environment away from people, it almost accentuates it more. So It's certainly something that I can identify with, and I know other people on the team will struggle with at times as well, just feeling like I just don't have the juice right now, right? And so yeah, that's certainly something that I can relate to and can understand, and it comes and goes, I think, for everybody on our team.
Totally. Katie.
Yeah, I've experienced it a little bit. It could be a little hard just to find your creative zone when working from home, especially when your home is supposed to be your relaxing place. But I definitely have a couple of tips on how I've been making that work.
Awesome. Do you mind sharing that with us?
Yeah.
Yeah, dive in. Let's do it.
So definitely attending the free webinars has been big for me, like the one we're hosting now with Lucid Press. I've been attending a lot for Asana, which is how we manage our workload, as well as How Design Live has been putting out some really cool free webinars as well, just to kind of spike that creativity. Listening to TED Talks and podcasts. The crazy one I think Scott and I were talking about by Stephen Gates. I highly recommend it.
Yeah, you mentioned that you watched Stephen Gates' webinar last week about chasing pink elephants. Yeah. No, he's great. Yeah, I mentioned this, but I saw him at Adobe Max a couple of years ago, and he's a great resource, especially if you're coming from a client side, corporate side creative, not so much agency. He provides a ton of resources for navigating that world. I totally have been feeling creative burnout this time too. Just this quarter, I've been working on this animated video for our marketing team, doing a lot of stuff in After Effects, and more than usual, it's just been super hard to wrap my mind around the project. And every time I sit down, I feel like I have to re-engage with it. And I think it's kind of what you were saying, Katie, the home is supposed to be your safe place, or your relaxing place away from work. And so transitioning back and forth all the time can be challenging. It can be challenging to stay in the zone and to keep those creative juices flowing. Another question. So a lot of collaboration is done in person. I know a lot of the best creative work for me has always come from sitting in a room together and hashing out different ideas, putting things up on a whiteboard, pitching ideas to each other. And now we're all separated. Have you two experienced any friction, any trouble from being able to keep that creative collaboration going?
Yeah, I think there's a tendency in this place where we're all kind of isolated and our only connection is a Zoom link or Slack or something like that, to not engage with our other creative team members very much. Typically if we're sitting at a desk and it's our team of 4 designers, it's just so much more natural just to lean over and be like, hey, can you give me some feedback on this? Can we kind of brainstorm this? Like you were saying, Scott, let's throw some things up on a whiteboard and start talking. And so not having that, I think, is certainly an obstacle to have to figure out from a creative standpoint. So my encouragement in all this is if you were to do it at a desk, if you just have a quick question, or if you need to grab somebody, there should be no hesitation amongst our creative team, the Brain Creative team, to say, hey, would somebody mind just jumping on a quick, informal Zoom call with me? Would somebody mind just giving me some feedback? I'd love that, right? And so creating that environment where that's okay to do that, and even beyond that, maybe even creating some additional spaces where that's just kind of set aside for people to do. I think that's the thing. So with any creative, I think there's collaboration is hugely necessary, and so we need to make space for that even when we're isolated. But then also making sure that when there is isolated creative time, that you're able to dive in and really figure things out on your own as well. So Katie, how have you been doing it?
Yeah, I miss definitely being in the office, being able to print out 20 different versions of the same flyer and showing them to everyone. So that's definitely been a struggle. But I think the thing that really helped me the most was coming up with what platforms we're going to be using for chatting with one another. So we try to keep Asana mainly for workload, Teams for things like quick chats. I know if I get a text from anyone on my team, I need to drop what I'm doing and just quickly run back to the computer. So just making that up front as well. And then Zoom for meetings with vendors and everything, just to keep that face-to-face connection.
Right. We saw a question from JD Banks here, Caleb. He said,
Yeah.
what is the creative space?
Yeah. So create a space. So by that, what I mean is sometimes, especially for people on my team, we have a lot of people who are introverted. We have a really close knit team, but are maybe not as they might not have the tendency to just proactively go out and say, "Hey, will you give me feedback? Will you just like spitball with me for 15 minutes?" That might not be the way that they're just wired. So by create a space, we even tried something last week where we just had an hour and a half long Zoom meeting that was just open. It was kind of like, I think it was titled Work Together, but separately, right? Where everybody's just kind of working and had headphones on, but people were just there. And then if you had a question, you could just like speak up, or if something sparked in your mind and you just wanted to kind of spitball about it, people were there and you could, just like you are in the office, you could take your headphones off and like chime in, or you could keep your headphones on and keep working. So that's kind of what I mean, JD, by create a space is if those on your team are not as intentional about proactively reaching out and asking for feedback, maybe you create some sort of place where on a weekly basis or daily basis, they feel like they can just do that really easily. It's a great question.
Caleb. So are you guys working like on the same screen together, or like just kind of in your own environments and then coming together if you have any questions?
Yeah, it's literally like an hour and a half long. Your camera's on, Zoom is up, and you're just kind of working. And so, yeah, it's just kind of all there. And so I think we're going to try it again this week because it's kind of weird in a way. It's just, it's odd, but after you get started, it's almost kind of comforting. I found like I started to actually get in quite a rhythm as I heard people typing and chairs creaking, and just had the sense of like other people are cranking on creative work too. Like, and it kind of motivated me and got the creative juices going. So yeah, that's what we do.
I saw a little bit earlier, Glenn mentioned that working from home and like having separation actually made him more innovative and more creative. And I was kind of focused on like, oh, what are the hard things that come with that? Have either of you seen positives coming out of, working remotely and some social isolation?
Yeah, I can start personally. So I almost feel like sometimes the freedom to be in your own space, although there are challenges certainly, the freedom to be in your own space, and there are times where I just feel like I want to lay down as I think through this problem, right? Or I want to just kind of like, brainstorm laying on the floor, or pacing around, on a balcony or something like that. It's kind of great because I can do that here in my own home. And then additionally, what I'll say is that I'm kind of the camp that says creative, like collaboration is certainly super important for creative, but so is tackling problems on your own and problem solving. Innovation really comes from like pursuing things in your own sphere as well. So for me, just having that space where people aren't tapping on my shoulder and I'm a little bit more removed, I've been able to really dive into certain things a little bit easier. So I think those are some of the pros that I've seen. Certainly there are cons, but yeah, I think there's some creative pros as well.
Yeah, I've noticed for myself, I have a 4-year-old boy, and taking 15-20 minutes throughout the day to go out and go play with him, and like more than anything I could do at work, even taking lunch break or hanging out with coworkers, I think taking time that's completely different from work helps me disconnect and refresh my brain, and so then I feel like more refreshed when I come back to the desk and sit down. I think that's been a huge benefit for me. Have you noticed any benefits, Katie?
Yeah, well, going off what you were saying, it's just that constant reminder, because when I first started working from home, I wasn't taking the breaks that I should have been. And I was just sitting there thinking like, around this time I'd be, going this way or talking to this person. So just allowing myself to still take those breaks the same I would be at work as well has really been helpful.
Yeah, that's actually, I've talked quite a bit about that with people on my team about that. During the usual workday, you have things built in where you like roll over to another person, you ask a question, and then have a little small talk. You might get up and get a drink. All of those things are built into your day to like build natural breaks. But when I'm sitting at my desk at home, that is not built in at all. And I can like sit here in my cave and work for hours, and then, and which can be good at times, but other times it can make me feel burnt out after a while of just sitting and cranking.
It's even crazy just to like not physically moving from one meeting or conference room or anything to the other. It's like all of a sudden it's like 4 hours have gone by and I've been in meetings, but I've sat in the same place. So I think that's great. Like building in those like kind of routines of like maybe you get up or you do something else just to kind of get away from your computer, I think is fantastic.
I'm seeing a comment here from Mary who says, I work for an 80-year-old company who was never allowed working from home. So this was a huge leap of faith for this company. If not for this pandemic, it would never have happened. I work better from home, fewer distractions, and we use Google Chat to shoot quick messages for help, brainstorming, etc. It's been seamless and surprisingly successful to most. And I think that's awesome. At Lucid Press and Lucid Chart, we were definitely an in-office company, but we always used Zoom and Slack. There was always, our company was spread out over a few different locations. So a lot of, so we were like semi, remote already. But that's good to hear that even an older company could like move pretty quickly and adapt to the new environment. I'm also seeing from Jay, we feel more pressure. We feel more pressure to turn and burn work, so there's no time for creativity or collaboration. 2 designers supporting 230 apartment communities. Yeah. That is killer. And I think that kind of goes back to what I was saying. Like there is more, I think there might be more expectation to like be at your desk and be turning and burning sometimes. And that can be the hard part about, being alone at home, I think.
Yeah, I'm also curious if that has to do with just the larger kind of economic implications, right? Of like, okay, we just need to do more. And with everybody at home, then it just kind of feeds into this thing of like, well, you can work more hours or something like that, or people are just more inclined to. So I certainly hear that issue as well. Like that pressure to like, we got to do more and more and more can certainly squeeze out some creativity and feed some burnout.
Yeah, a huge, my heart goes out to you, to those 2 designers supporting 230 apartment communities. That's insane. That's a lot of work.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm one designer for just about a little over 50 apartment communities, multifamily, single family, senior. If there's any way you can get those timelines up front with your team, for me, it's like maybe like 1 to 3 days for like a flyer that just needs some minor edits, 4 to 7 days for something that I really kind of just need a little bit more time to think of, get creative on, and then I kind of, from that time to 7 days, have that time to work on it. If it's something huge, like a billboard project that you're working on, definitely allot that time, be upfront about it. Like I'm gonna need at least 10 to 15 days in order to make this happen. Mm-hmm. So if you can possibly be upfront with those timelines, that might help the situation too.
Yeah, that's something that I was talking with my team just yesterday about. I think when we're communicating over Slack, it can be really easy to say like, hey, can you do this thing for me? And there's not really that filter of like speaking to somebody in person. And so we were talking about strategies of like how to say no, but not really say no. Like you're trying to be collaborative and you're trying to support the team, but you need to be able to talk to the people about like, okay, what is the real scope of this project and what's the real priority? And I have these other things, and like, and try to not just let things pile up. And that can be really easy as a graphic designer because we're the type of people who just want to solve problems. We just want to get things done. And I think that project management, at least for me, and I feel like for other graphic designers too, doesn't come naturally and is more of a learned trait to plan things out and to push back and to get things figured out in the long run. Yeah. So I want to kind of shift gears a little bit. So Katie, you kind of touched on this earlier, but what practices at home are keeping you inspired? And Katie, you mentioned TED Talks, webinars. Caleb, what's working for you to keep you engaged and inspired?
Yeah, I certainly am leaning into music pretty heavily right now, just to, it's like one of those beautiful things that isn't going away. So just trying to lean into that, especially when I'm trying to get into the zone. So I'm certain all of you have your go-to playlists on Spotify. I certainly have mine, just to I don't know, for me, music brings out an emotion and kind of get me to a place that is otherwise hard to get to, especially in my own home. So some good noise canceling headphones and some good music is one of my go-to's. And beyond that, I mean, I come from a video background, so I mean, like everybody, we're watching more Netflix and streaming stuff than ever before. So trying to pick like not just mind numbing shows, but like some really good cinematic shows that I just watch. I'm like, the thought and the creativity and the cinematography and editing that went into this, like it really inspires me and gets me excited to figure out, okay, I might not be, making a hit show like Peaky Blinders was a big one that I was watching, but how do I take some of those things and get inspired to put that into my own work? So those are kind of my things, nothing too crazy.
Yeah, I'm sure all of you have been like absolutely saturated with ads for Masterclass. Like I'm
Yeah.
sure it hits your YouTube pre-roll constantly. Well, I actually got a gift subscription for it for my birthday last year, and I took the Annie Leibovitz photography class, which was wonderful. Like I already enjoy photography. I don't consider myself a photographer per se, but like going through the exercises and taking them seriously has helped me get out of my head. I also recently started a class by David Sedaris about comedy writing
Oh,
and
that's
like
awesome.
memoirs. And so like that's been a lot of fun to take in my embarrassing life stories and turn them into like funny stories. It's been kind of therapeutic that way, but it's helped my brain stay like exercised and expanding, even when it feels like there's this overwhelming staying home. The news is awful. Like I think it helps break out of that. Katie, was there anything else? I know you mentioned some things before. Is there anything else that comes to mind about how to stay inspired at home?
Yeah, it's gonna sound pretty straightforward, but like subscribing to those emails, those inspiring emails, the Pantone, the fonts one, my favorite one currently is Paper Specs. And from a production standpoint, just getting those ideas, seeing what other people have done with like restaurant menus and some really cool bookbinding, I highly recommend it.
Awesome. So I'm just going to jump back to a couple of the questions in the chat that I wanted to get to. One of them is, does anyone use work or screen monitoring tools to monitor your creative teams? If so, how does that affect your team's efficiency? Um, we don't use it on my team. And I wonder, I'd be surprised if it helped increase productivity. I feel like having someone look over your shoulder would make it hard um, to be able to do what you need to do to be productive. I find like Caleb kind of mentioned, well, maybe this isn't what you're saying, but like I like music going. Sometimes I'll have videos going in the background. Sometimes I need to switch to something else really quick to get my mind, out of a creative block. And I think that would be hard if there was someone watching and maybe that feeling of someone criticizing my process, I guess. Caleb and Katie, do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think, yeah, I certainly would steer away from micromanaging as much as possible, right? I think the biggest thing, because from our experience, right, when this kind of first happened, Lucidchart was like, hey, here are some, you could do a daily sync. Here are some questions that you can ask. Here are some reports that you could do just to make sure everybody's like staying in sync, right? And I think it could be perceived that that's like, hey, they're just trying to like monitor what I'm doing and make sure I'm still working. Don't they trust me to do what I'm doing at home? And for our company, the answer is yes, we absolutely trust you to do your work at home. And I think really, if you can pivot those things from, hey, are you doing your work? Like, are you doing what you're supposed to be doing? And if it's more like, is there anything that's impeding your progress? Like, what are things that are getting in the way? If it's really around that latter kind of question, then I think it's really helpful to say, what's going on? Is there anything that's impeding your progress? And if there are barriers, let's figure out how to remove those together. Then I think it's really helpful. But if it's more just like making sure that we're checking the boxes and getting stuff done, I don't think that's going to be really uplifting for anybody.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, trust with yourself, trust with your team. That's really going to be what makes working from home possible for your company in the future.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ronald says that would kill my creativity.
Yeah. Yes, it certainly would.
Yeah, we're also seeing comments about reading books, about innovation, predicting technology, understanding future trends. I'm a voracious reader. Am I saying that? Voracious?
I think you got it.
I know how to read. That's fine. I'm a voracious reader, and I am using this time, especially the time I would have been commuting to the office or traveling for out of the office meetings, to read many books. That's true too. You know, I've gotten 2 hours back out of my life from not commuting, which has been great. And that is where a lot of room for doing some of these creative, exploration has come from.
Yeah, if anything, I'm more sane now than my 3-hour commute I had previously to this.
Wow.
So.
Yeah,
that's
fantastic. That can take a big chunk. So on this, I kind of have another question about graphic design here, to kind of shift gears. Actually, let me check the chat just to see if there's anything else we should hit.
Well, you checked that. There was somebody earlier who asked about any sort of motion graphics tutorials. And so School of Motion is a really great one for you who asked. Thanks for asking. School of Motion is great and is one that I constantly direct people to if you're looking for something. So quick interjection.
Yeah, that should be noted that Caleb comes from the world of commercials and making and video production. And so like he's a pro at that. Katie, you had a question. Can you list that site that you get emails from? Paper something.
Paper Specs.
Paper Specs. Is that the website, paperspecs.com or something?
Yep.
Okay. There's another question for you, Katie. Question for Katie. You had mentioned that you work with housing for seniors. I work with seniors in the referral and placement profession. Having a hard time on content, finding the balance on info, COVID talk and info. I think it gets to a point it's too much. I lost my gal who did all our social media and ads. Yep, the batter up these days. so it sounds like, Kathy, it sounds like you are taking up more of the work now. And yeah, how do you balance communication? And I guess this is for us too, Caleb. Like, how do we balance communication about COVID and getting people informed about it and it being just too much? And I think that's maybe a question all brains are kind of asking themselves right now.
Yeah, luckily I work with a team of 3 incredible marketing experts. So they take on a lot of the communication between what's been being relayed to the properties. So I haven't really had much experience with that. Sorry, couldn't be more help.
No, that's fine.
Yeah. So the question is largely around like, how much is too much in terms of communicating about COVID-19? Is that right? Like, yeah, as a brand, yeah, that's a great question to be asking. It's something that we've had to ask ourselves quite a bit. And we you see emails from companies and it's kind of like, I think of the airline companies especially. It's like, weekly I'll get an email from Delta or American Airlines about like, what we're doing for COVID-19. And it is certainly something that we should all be conscious of, I think, and making sure that we're communicating what's necessary. Where I start to get hesitant is when it starts to feel opportunistic, right? I think that is really going to do your brand some disfavors, in my opinion, right? So when it's necessary, when it's something that is either uplifting or a necessary communication, information that does need to be passed on to your customers, clients, whoever they may be, great. But if it starts to be like, how can we use this situation to our advantage from a marketing perspective? That's where I start to say, let's put a brand stop sign up there and just say, hey, is that really what we want to be about? So I think that's my advice. It's an interesting dynamic and balance to find.
Yeah. And I think I agree with Glenn here, where he says much of the COVID-19 communications, frankly, have become a trite and get totally tuned out because it loses its value. It's kind of like, remember when the European Union changed their privacy laws, and so we were getting tons of emails about the terms and conditions changing. I know it's not really the same thing, but I've kind of felt a little bit like that, where I keep getting emails from every company telling me what they're doing. And really, I think, I just hope that they're staying home and washing their hands. I don't know, I don't know that I need to know everything that they're doing. But I also get that in general, like brands are people, like there's people behind this, and we do want to we care and we want to use our platform to be able to share hope and like share encouragement. Um, I would like to think that as much as possible, a lot of this is just coming out of like care for other people and like saying that as an organization, as a people, like we're concerned about it too.
Yeah.
Not necessarily my
Go
brand,
ahead,
but
Katie.
I think it's been interesting to see what other brands have been doing. I think the best commercial I've seen so far has been Frito-Lay's commercial. It's not, and they said it the best, it's not about what companies are saying during this time. It really is all about what they're doing and just how they relate what they're doing with their employees, their customers, their community. That's really great to see. Some commercials I'm not personally a fan of are the ones for the food and pizzas industry. You see them and they're like, oh yeah, it's fresh. We never touch your food once it comes out of the oven. That's great. You should have never been touching my food once it came out of the oven. Like, what is so new here?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really just, that's the place I think brands have here. So.
Yeah, I agree. So I'm going to change gears here again, moving away from creativity and inspiration. And now I want to talk more about our workspaces and what it's like working from home. And maybe this is more of a practical portion. So here I want to talk about like our physical spaces that we're working in, and also the processes we're using to keep things on track and keep things moving while we're all working from home. So just like maybe to get a little personal here, what is your setup like right now where you're at? And Caleb, I know you sent a picture a few weeks ago where you actually had your laptop on top of a shoebox on top of your dresser. And I hope it's different now.
It's actually worse. So yeah, I was about to say, I am very fortunate. I have a standing desk at my home. It just so happens to be my dresser and shoe boxes on top of that dresser where I place my laptop. It's just slapped together, but it was what I had at the time and it's what made sense. And I was like, I'll figure something out that's more permanent later. Well, guess what? It was like 7 weeks later. I still hadn't figured that out. So right now I'm sitting, instead, so I was sitting and not standing for an hour. I'm sitting with basically a bin and a large hamper with my computer propped up at the perfect, eye height. So that's what my workspace is looking like. It's unfortunately, I think having an in-home office would make things much smoother. Like it would just give you that space. Whereas right now, based on our living situation, this is what I've got. So that's my setup. That's my setup. Yeah.
That's scrappy. I like it.
Yeah.
Katie, how about you?
I would love to have a home office right about now. I'm currently in my bedroom, which is a big no-no, really. You shouldn't really work in your room. But my laptop is on my bed. I'm just kind of sitting on the floor, and then I have the window out in front of me. So.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I guess I'm the lucky one here. We had an extra bedroom that we had been using for one of the kids, and then I have a couple kids, and then we just moved him into the other room, and so now we kind of have a dedicated office space. And we even went to IKEA and bought a bunch of IKEA stuff, and so, man, I feel bad.
Wow.
I don't want to gloat. I'm sorry.
Sitting there in your own home office while we're figuring it out in our bedrooms.
Right? I even got a fern like right over here. I've got a fern right here looking at me. And I've got a window. But so that brings up a good question, is that a lot of working from home spaces aren't ideal. How do you, like, at least when we were in the office, I had some inspirational books lined up, and I had a picture, and I had like these things, and I could set everything just right so I could feel like I was in the zone. With not being able to have your own home office space, like how have you been able to establish a space for yourself? And like, what does that look like? I mean, that probably means you're not staying in the same place all the time.
Yeah. So we can get fairly personal. I have a year and a half old son, so that creates an interesting dynamic, right? So that's something where it's like, in order for me to have a space, it does mean having like a closed door at times, right? And just being able to say, okay, I need, a few hours just to really dive in. So, and I see right here, I mean, I know people, with children or living situations all across the board, we have to figure out how do we work through those distractions, and how do we create a space for those distractions? So for me, it's really about saying, okay, and just communicating to my family, and just saying, this is going to be a time where I'm just going to put headphones in. I'd love to keep the door shut if at all possible, and I'm just going to get in the groove, right? And then the flip side of that, I think the difficult part is then saying, okay, I'm done now, right? I'm done with work. It's time for me to shut off, especially when I'm like working right next to my bed. I saw some comments earlier from people who, it's like there's just this mentality of like it's always on, right? Because I'm working in my home, and my home is also my like personal space. It's like I'm always at work. The two are getting conflated, and I don't like it, right? So I think that's a reality that is certainly an obstacle that we have to overcome. And so for me, what's helpful is is doing some like physical things that help basically trigger this idea that it's the end of the day. Work is done right now, right? So for me, at the end of the day, that's putting everything away. I don't see it anymore, right? On the weekends, like I'm not going to see my laptop or anything if I'm not working that weekend. It's all gone, and my home is now my home. Additionally, something that's been helpful is, trying to trick my mind into figuring out that the space is now different. So what that might mean is, at the end of the day, work is done, I log off, I'm going to go for a run with my son, push him in the stroller, and then come back. And I come back and I'm like, oh, okay, it's home time now. So those are just some random little things I think you have to figure out for your own self, like how you make your space work and what kind of tricks you can play on your mind. So I'm curious if other people have ideas, or Katie and Scott, what you all do, but that's kind of my angle.
Yeah, I noticed in the chat, hard starts, hard stops. That's definitely easier since I do have a room, but it can be hard. Like I said, I have a son, and it can be hard because that's weird. Dad is home, isn't he here to play? And so like being like clear about start and stop times, and try to stick to a schedule as much as possible can make it easier on myself and my partner and my kids, and that just makes things easier for everybody. I think another thing is take advantage of the fact that you're working from home. And I see people saying they work outside when they can. And I think that is super helpful. There are times when I think I am more productive when I sit in the living room with Netflix running and kind of crank through some mindless work. It's definitely more enjoyable, and the snacks are better at my house than they were at work. So like that all like works out. Katie, do you have any thoughts?
No, I think you guys covered it all, honestly.
Let me just check the chat again. You guys are being so interactive here.
Yeah, I love these ideas.
I'm loving it. Thank you so much. Hide my computer and start on my hobby. Yes, I am constantly tempted to just, I'm just gonna, what's going on Slack. Maybe I just need to check on something really quick. I probably could fit a little bit more in, and really, unless I really have to, you gotta put it away. I'm loving these comments about seeing your coworkers' kids, your coworkers' families. I think that's totally true. In our morning stand-ups, my manager, his daughter is constantly on his lap. Every morning she says hi, and sometimes she asks like the morning stand-up question that we go around and answer to like get to know each other a little bit better. And that's actually been like a huge plus of working from home, is being able to like see people for like their more human side and what's going on with them. that I think when you're in the office, you kind of have a front, you have a mask on of this is my professional face, and I always dress like this, and I'm very professional, and I like saying things like let's put a pin in it and let's circle back to that and stuff like that. And it's really nice to see people in like a more natural state.
Yeah.
Let me just check here. Okay, so kind of on that note, I want to see who, like, now that we've been working from home for 2 months or a few weeks, whatever it is, I want to know that going forward, who would be like, would you be more likely or less likely to want to work from home going forward? So I'm going to launch that poll.
That's a great question.
So again, it's like, after this experience, do you want to work from home more or less or about the same?
And while you're doing that, there was a question about how often do you meet with your creatives per week? With our whole team, for us, we do just a weekly Monday meeting for work, and then each team, design or motion or front-end engineering, they'll have their daily syncs as they see fit, right? It could be daily, it could be every other day. But then we also have just kind of social things throughout the week that are built in of like, hey, let's just all talk after lunch. So that's my quick answer to that one. But anyway, sorry, Scott.
No, that's great. Thank you. Caleb, can I email you regarding more animation tools and programs?
Bring it. Caleb, C-A-L-E-B, at lucidchart.com.
So it looks like 57% of you want to work from home more, some less, understandable. We talked about some of the challenges, and about a third of you, 27%, about the same. I think in my camp, I think there have been some really big positives to working from home. We kind of mentioned some of them. Is there anything else off the top of your head that has been like a big win for working from home?
I think this is a really great question, because I know people on my team were like, I would love to, work remotely. And then all of a sudden this happened, and now they're like, please bring me back. Like they're like, I can't do this anymore. And other people may have been more skeptical or never would have thought that they would have liked it. And they're like, actually, there's some really good benefits to it. So I think it's just, I don't know that I have an answer beyond what we already discussed earlier, but I think it's just interesting how actually having to live through it makes you consider it in a different light, like the reality is there.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that. It's been really interesting because I think, throughout the industry, companies everywhere I think that it's been reluctant to like support a work from home program. And it's just been interesting to see like the entire world trying it out all of a sudden to see if it works. And I think there are a ton of benefits that come from being able to spend more time with, on the things that you want to do, because there's less commute time. You're better able to, spend time with family. And I think that as we learn, like we've talked about a lot of the challenges of working from home, but I think as we learn to come up with the systems and processes to deal with, still being more creative and collaborating, I think that it'll take greater hold in the industry altogether. At least that's my prediction for the future.
I love this comment too, the environment benefits. We've seen that where we live, and it's just been like so much clearer. You can see the mountains much better. I think that's something that I think companies, especially on the forefront, will be much more considerate about, of like, wow, there's not people driving to work every single day, and polluting. So I think that's a great point as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Katie, do you have any thoughts on that?
No, I agree.
So we are getting close on time, but I have one big question to ask, and that is, what is one piece of advice you'd give to these other creative designers, marketers who are facing the toughest of these challenges right now? maybe that's a too vague of question because we talked about a lot of challenges. But Caleb, you seem like you have a thought.
I have a start of a thought. We'll see if it turns into a complete idea. Um, I think my encouragement, this is what I'd say, my encouragement would be to give yourselves some slack during this time. And this is what I'll just kind of tell you what I've told my team. This is like a very different work environment, a very different time to be trying to tackle things. And without having each other and without having those normal routines of just shooting the breeze or joking around or other just kind of releases from your day, I encourage them to say like, hey, if in the middle of the day you decide you need to take a walk, right? If you decide that you want to just like start to dovetail or rabbit trail down a certain path that's not necessarily related to your exact thing that you're working on, but it's going to give you that kind of creative freedom and inspiration, take a half an hour and do that. Follow that, right? Because we're just missing out on some of those, I think, necessary uplifting kind of distractions that otherwise, would give us creative juices. So I encourage them to like give yourself some slack. Obviously, it has to do with your manager or your organization, and hopefully you're at one that is a little bit more flexible with that. But that's my encouragement: is just find ways to continue to stay inspired and motivated, and cut yourself some slack when needed.
Yeah, going off what Caleb said, a work-life balance is so important right now. So making sure that you're taking time for yourself is really important.
Yeah, I saw a comment about in the chat about focus on mental health, and I think that's totally fair. I mean, we're all going through it, so it kind of seems like maybe you don't really notice, but there's a lot of bad news. There's a lot of insecurity. I've talked to people who have lost their jobs, and maybe you're sitting here thinking, I don't know if my company's gonna make it another 3 months, and those are real concerns that can really weigh on you. And I would encourage you to like be honest with yourself that you can take time for feeling stressed out. That's just as valid as having the flu. If you are feeling stressed out, if you feel like you can't be yourself, if you feel like you can't be there for your loved ones, like that, those are signs to like take a break, step away. Whatever brochure that they desperately need probably can wait another day, and give yourself some time. I think we are just about out of time. So we actually have a prize for all of you. Oh, well, sorry. We have a drawing. We have a couple gift cards that we're giving out as a huge thank you for all of you for participating, especially participating in the chat. You have all made it so much more meaningful and so much more insightful. I want to give a huge thank you for Katie and Caleb for joining me on this webinar. Really enjoyed all of your insights and thoughts. And I just want everyone here, as we're all designers, we're all creatives working in marketing fields, that this can be a really weird time, and that like we're all in this together, and to encourage each of you, if you need it, to reach out to others for help and support. I am just going to share my screen real quick. Work.
While you're pulling that up, I think Olivier said something about having a dedicated time just to catch up with people and not talk shop. So we do that as well, and that's been super helpful, where it's just, we call it the post-lunch social, open time to just kind of talk and catch up. So I think that's a great idea as well.
Zoom happy hours have been big for our team.
Yeah, those are great.
Yeah. Can you guys all see the slide deck now? It has our beautiful.
I can.
So you're in the right place. We've got a couple DoorDash gift cards for you guys. Let's see here. Let's see if we can pull up who won. Okay, so randomly picked from this fantastic group of viewers. The winners are Ann Hughes and Jay Piper, and we'll be sending you an email with the $25 gift card to DoorDash so you guys can get yourself a delicious lunch and keep your energy going. Thanks so much for joining us on this webinar. Thank you so much for participating. Have a great week and keep going. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.